All right. Welcome, everyone, to Yuma Center in Washington, D.C., where we inspire women and impact generations. My name is Mary Ellen Yep, and I'm the program director here at Yuma Center, and I'm so excited to have everyone here tonight. We have a lot of women actually in and around DC joining us tonight, along with women from 18 other states across the country, which is so exciting. In fact, we actually have women from Canada joining us tonight. So we are officially international. This is very exciting. So I do want to let you know that if you were here at Yuma and we were having this event in person, it typically is a networking event where we have professional development, a little short speaker, talk about professional development, and then we have a wine and cheese reception afterwards. And since I can't give you any wine and cheese afterwards, there will be one lucky winner at the end who will receive this bottle of wine and a box of chocolate truffles. So stay tuned after the Q&A and we will assign a winner, a happy winner for that bottle of wine and that chocolate. So before we get started tonight, I did want to know what type of industry all of you work in. So right now, I'm going to send you a poll. So if you're watching the Zoom screen, a poll should pop up right now and you can type in what your industry is. So I'll give you about 1 minute to fill that out. Good, a lot of you are voting. And if I didn't catch someone's industry, you can privately message me at the bottom. So I'll give you about 30 more seconds. We have just about everyone. So we have a couple of industries that weren't included. We have a pastry chef, we have an R&D food industry, we have someone in mental health. We're going to end polling in about 2 seconds. All right, and we're going to share the results. So we have a lot of people in education, nonprofit, and the NGO world. We have finance and business and marketing, health and medicine, government and military, communications, real estate, homemakers, and some people in the law or legal field, and then some others. So great. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Her name is Susan Mangels. And Susan Mangels, PhD, is Senior Vice President for Consulting Services at A.C. Fitzgerald, a fundraising consulting firm headquartered in our very own Washington, D.C. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts from Furman University, a Master's in Education from Harvard University, and a PhD from the University of Illinois. Mangels has been Chief Development Officer at the Independent Institute, Vice President for Institutional Advancement at Lindenwood University, President of Lexington College, and on the administrative leadership team of both Oakcrest School and Montress School. She speaks frequently on fundraising, university center building, executive leadership, and work-life balance. Susan currently lives in Chicago. So without further ado, please help me welcome Susan.
Well, thank you. This is such an interesting way to do it because I see I see the numbers going up on people starting to step into the this webinar, and I can see some faces. So this is very neat. But thanks for tuning in, and I think we all need a round of applause for the fact that we are not laying on the couch eating cheese doodles in our pajamas right now. Although I am not saying that in these odd times that might not be a default that happens periodically. So thanks so much for showing up on Thursday night, and I'm delighted to be a part of this this seminar. And we talked about being the CEO of your career. And I actually have in my notes, I started it with, you are the CEO of your career. That is, I think that that's a truth. And I think that it's something that I want to talk a little bit about tonight. Talk about what that means, what CEOs kind of like, how does it relate to my career? What resources I need to do that well, and then how to do it every day. So this is based on a variety of studies that I've done, CEOs that I coach, and my own experiences. So it's certainly up for, everything's up for discussion, but these are things that I know to be true. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share, I think I'll share my screen. You're going to see a very simple PowerPoint. It's not designed to put you to bed, to sleep. I just thought then you'd know where we are in the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen now. And let's see what pops up. There we go. You are the CEO of your career. So I think to start with, we can say, what is a CEO? Well, a CEO is the highest ranking officer of an organization. So when you think about it, not only are you the highest ranking officer of your organization, your life, but you're the organization too, it's your life. So it's an interesting, I guess, analogy here. CEOs are responsible for the mission of that organization. And what's a mission? It's what the organization does. So we're responsible for that in our lives, and we're responsible for accomplishing the mission. We know that we are built for, to do certain things in life. There are other things that we wonder, what am I going to do in life? But so we're responsible for fully achieving that mission. What do CEOs do? They're leaders, they're responsible for management, they're responsible for operations of that organization, for communicating that organization's mission. They're responsible for interacting with other people and how that interaction is done. CEOs are responsible and are in charge of things that can't be delegated to anyone else. And the same thing is true about our lives. We can't delegate these things to anyone else. So one of them I would say would be the vision for how we have our dreams and our hopes for living our life, our goals. Those have to come from us. Of course, we might learn from other people, take advice, but that vision comes from us. Strategy, how we're going to get there, that's up to us to determine. CEOs set the culture of their organization, or they play a big role in doing that. And we have to play a big role, and we do play a big role if we own it, in how we're going to live our lives, in the type of life we're going to live. What's a culture? It's the way things are done around here. We define the way things are done around here in our life to a great extent. Doesn't mean controlling everything, but what it means is using that agency, using our reason, using our talents, using building courage in ourselves, using habits of reflection in order to create a culture in my life and live the way that I know to be true. CEOs also allocate resources. We need to allocate the resources in our life. We need to decide, how much time am I going to spend on something? What things am I not going to do? What is something I'm going to focus on, and what's something I am going to leave in the dust? I am not going to focus on that. And we're responsible for making those decisions. CEOs have a plan with people in their organization that they deal with processes, how things will happen. And CEOs also make sure that there are tools in place to track that the mission's being achieved. We can think that too. Do I have tools in place? Maybe times of reflection, maybe ways of taking stock, measurements in place where I say, how am I doing as a professional woman, as a woman, in the different roles in my life? So we can say, how does a CEO do all of these things? Well, Good CEOs have specific habits that they're likely to have mastered or at least be pretty good at in order to do their job well as the chief executive officer. So we want to develop those too in living out our career. First of all, that habit of proactivity, you know, of not waiting for things to happen to me, but being the acting person within making things happen, deciding I'm going to go about and set goals for myself, knowing that my life relies on me. I'm not, I'm not a leaf going down the river. I'm someone who can, make decisions, make goals, strive to be better in certain areas, say no to the things that I don't want to do. CEOs are also goal oriented. And I'm a big fan, you'll see it on my resource list. I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey. His book is a bit old, but so many other studies have been based on it. I think it's true. That idea of starting with goals, start with the end in mind. Because, in a sense, if we don't have a goal, who knows where we'll end up? We're not targeted for anything. So good CEOs have goals, and they start with goals, and then their actions track to those goals. CEOs are willing, good ones are willing, and they do walk through fog and ambiguity at times. And I think that's especially relevant these days. We don't know how this is going to end up. We all know we're uncomfortable right now with all of the coronavirus. We know that if we listen to, one news channel, we'll hear one thing. If we listen to another news channel, we'll hear another. And if we look at our Twitter feed, it's yet another. There's a lot of fog around us. We still need to walk through that, keeping our goals in mind and recognizing that we don't have to have all of the answers, but we still need to be able to make decisions every day. CEOs are able to make decisions without 100% of the data that they need. CEOs, I think, are responsible for the entire endeavor. And that's something that we want to think, do I act as if every day, my life is something that's, it's my project here. And, and I want to build this so that I have a life well lived, and I'm the one to do that. There's a saying that a good leader sees everything. I think it sees everything, says few things, and does even less, does very strategic things. So I'm just going to say, see everything and none things. We want to be very aware of the culture around us. We want to be very aware of how we do our work. We want to know ourselves. We want to be, recognize the responsibilities that we have. But then before we just take action or before we jump, we want to be able to evaluate things and think, is this the right time? For me, is this the right time for my family? Is this the right time for, I don't know, my team at work right now? So to be able to see many things, but only act on the ones that we see are the prudent things that we should act on. CEOs play to their strengths. That's been my experience. And I think men often, this is a problem, maybe this is a sexist comment, but I think that men do that easier than women. Women are always trying to get better at their weaknesses, I think. I had a mentor once that told me that. He ran a steel company, and he said, focus on your strengths. You're getting better at your weaknesses. It's good in your spiritual life, but it's not in your professional life. Focus on your strengths in your professional life. And I always remember that, so we can think, is my strength project management? Is my strength accounting? Is my strength being creative, dealing with people? Does my job and do my job I'm jonesing for, that I'm working towards, do they have my core strengths in them? We don't want to get taken up, but this is a career I should do, when those are the things that we don't enjoy doing, or maybe we're not really good at. So we want to see that, I like a good CEO, that we have our strengths in mind and try to make sure that the work that we do plays to those things and put ourselves in those situations or set up the structure so that we can use our strengths really well. CEOs, people often talk about they're visionaries. They don't have to be visionaries, and we don't have to be visionaries, but we do want to have vision. We do want to imagine our best selves. Just like companies, leaders of companies, when they're envisioning how can we grow this thing, they think, how could we really be great? Well, we want to have that in mind too. How can I really be great? What's my vision? And not get, I think, frustrated if we haven't hit that vision perfectly, because we probably, honestly, if we have an incredible vision for what to be as a woman, we may never hit all of those pieces. But in the trying and in the striving in our career and in our life, that's a battle worth fighting for. But we want to be able to have that high vision of how we want to live our life, of the things that we know are true and that we really love. So then when I think, okay, that's a CEO, well, what are some things about careers to keep in mind? Well, I've talked about you being the one to drive your career. Yeah, no one else is going to do it. No one else should do it because it's your life. I like to see a career as a tapestry. There's a book about that, and I don't really like the book, but I like the analogy. That a career is a lot of different strands woven together. So you'll see this on the share that I have here. And actually, I'm gonna go forward in the in this PowerPoint. I just did what does a CEO do? And how does a CEO do it? I just did that. I think those are true. So ways to think about a career is next. Think about your career as a tapestry. It's full of different strands, different jobs, different experiences, different uses of your talents. And to me, that's what we aim for at the end of the day. It's not a linear thing where I started here and I worked my way up that stairway. Well, no, I think for a lot of women, especially because we play so many different roles in our life, whether we have children, whether we have a husband, whether we take time off to do something else, whether we come back into the workforce, that doesn't make for a perfect linear progression. I think even men these days are finding that career-wise, that's not the way a career works. And I'm thinking in this day and age too, with the job market shifting right now, we're probably going to find a lot of people will start, if they're good at it and take, are the CEO of their careers, they will start weaving a tapestry of their career experience. And that's what you want to think of it as. Maybe this is my bright red thread that I did. This is my big blue piece here. This is the rough thread. This is the silky part of my job. But think of it. I think of mine that way, and I like to think of it that way, and then think my next job maybe adding a little bit of color in some area. It may be tightening up the threads. I don't know. I don't want to use carry the analogy too far. But what we do have to keep in mind, and it is true, is that career research shows that people have average 3 careers in their life. And we're not talking about 3 jobs, 3 careers. And I bet for women, if we were just to hold and just run it for women, or women certainly too, that decide to have children and maybe change the way they're doing their job, their paid employment, that we might be a little bit different. Another piece of that I know to be is that it's not a helpful exercise if we're looking for your dream job. A lot of times people say, I don't want to take a job unless I know it's the perfect job for me. And I don't think that's particularly helpful for growth, because when we think about careers, when we think about jobs, there's often, are we getting some feedback here? I'm just thinking, maybe I'll stop the share for a second. Okay, yeah, feedback. Well, hopefully it will go away. Is everyone on mute?
Yeah, everyone's on mute.
Hmm.
Try and turn. Sometimes what gives feedback is Wi-Fi. Let me mute myself too. I'll mute myself. Let's see.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Hopefully this is better. I'm not hearing it now. So what I'm talking about is not falling into the trap of falling in love with your dream job and thinking, what I need to find the perfect thing before I take the next step in my work. That's just not the case. There are so many things that we can learn from almost any job. So what we want to do is keep in mind, what are the things in this job that I'm good at? What are the things that I like? And then keep that, whether it's a list or a notebook, keep those things in mind. And when we go looking for the next job, and I think the best time to look for the next job is when we're in the job we're in, because then we're not in mode of, oh my gosh, I need a job, because we're already getting paid. We're already in a job. Think about those things that we love and think, I'm going to try to find a job that has some of those things, the next step in my career that I love. I was also thinking being grateful for the aspects of our jobs now is something that's very helpful. If we're lucky, in my theory, 80% of our job is something that we like doing. But it's often maybe half of our job is something that we really love. Half of it we could give or a quarter of it we could give or take. Maybe a quarter of it we really don't like. That's not bad, Think about, I find it helpful to think about the things that I'm grateful for in my job, honestly. And then look at those and think, and maybe if I take a next step, what are those things that I really love? When I talk about, and I talk often about careers and building your kind of your curriculum vitae, I always encourage people, you're supposed to drive your career, but you don't need to build the road. Meaning there are things, there are vehicles that can help you get to the goal in your career. So for instance, using networks that come with your company, earning degrees, those can help you in next steps of your career. Taking advantage of professional development opportunities at work, it's really interesting, but sometimes those can really open doors, and they're doors that were unexpected. Now I'm going to share the screen again. All right. I think with all of it, though, when we're talking about driving our career and seeing it as a tapestry and, not getting stuck on this idea of a dream job, is kind of having that joie de vivre about our work. I always say, educated women in a first world country, there are so many things we can do. What are the things that I'm good at? What are the things that, seem to fit with the anchors that I have? And I'll talk about anchors in a couple minutes. The anchors that I have in order so that it will fit in my life. Well, I'm thinking if we go about exploring what the steps are for our career and how to be a CEO, what are the steps that we need? What resources do we need? Well, I think first, know your strengths. We can know what we like, but we also want to know what we're good at. And we want our job to play to them, right? So like my mentor said, well, a good tool to use to find out your strengths is the old Gallup Strength Finders. I remember when I took it, I was like, I don't know that that's me. And I showed it to a friend and she was like, Mangles, that is definitely you. And I was like, oh, okay, this is, so don't just rely on yourself, get an honest friend and have that honest friend tell you. Honest friends can also tell you your strengths, but when our friends love us, sometimes they tell us only the good things, and we want to make sure that they also tell us the things that are not our strengths, but we want to focus on our strengths.
So true. Actually, if you just go to the next slide, I think everyone.
Okay.
The resource.
Next slide. All right, let's see. Ways to think about a career?
No, I think you had a resource slide.
That's at the end. I'm going to put that up.
Okay, you can continue.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So, it's just a bibliography. I always give bibliographies. But so playing to your strengths, and then think, what motivates me? I think that that's another resource, another thing that you can use. And Daniel Pink has a good book about that called Drive. What are the things that motivate me? Because if something motivates me, chances are they're linked to our strengths. And then knowing what your anchors are. And there are 5 anchors that you can see. What are the most important? The first one is location. Where do I want to live? Is it the world my location, or is Washington, D.C. my location? Compensation. What's my all-in package? Where are my boundaries on that? How high? Well, how high would probably, anyway. How low can I go? How much vacation do I need? What are the challenges that I want to have in my job? How important is that to have challenging work? The fourth thing is, what type of culture do I want to work within? And what are my my go, no go things? And then the actual work. The fifth thing would be the actual work. Are there things that I cannot do in the next job? For instance, if somebody offered me a job that had a lot of bookkeeping, I could not do that job because that's not something that I'm good at, right? So I would make sure that the job I was accepting really didn't have bookkeeping or had a very small amount and a helper, probably. Another, I think, resource that you need in your life with your job, with your career, is to develop a habit of honest reflection. Sitting still for 15 minutes a day and reflecting on, how am I living? How do I want to live? What do I care about? Is a great tool to develop and can really help in tracking career growth. And then if we look at how am I living and where do I want to be, how can I shrink that delta in between the two of them? So then day to day, just some things that I know work very well in taking charge of, or feeling like I'm taking charge of my life. There's resources. Eating the frog. Eating the frog is one of the most important things, I think, to knowing that I'm in charge of my career and how I live my my work every day, every month. Eating the frog, I think Mark Twain said it first. It's good to eat the frog every day, as early as possible. So I try to eat the frog when I first start work. I do try to do the hardest thing of the day first up. If it's making that phone call, doing that report, whatever it is, it's a good habit to get into. But it also helps me to make progress. And then all day I'm not feeling guilty for, I've got that frog, got to do something about that frog, but I know I've done the frog and I know I've moved along. Focusing on bringing value is another thing. Thinking, what is needed in my work situation right now, and what can I do today that will bring the most value to the endeavor? To me, that's a very important kind of a mantra, because we all have a million things to do. We all have more or less control of our schedules. Sometimes we have hardly any, but we can think, okay, what can I do today that has the most value? Being solution oriented, not just focusing on the problems, but focusing on, okay, if this is the reality, what needs to be done that I can do? Telling people what we need, not asking I really need this, but telling people. It's very empowering. And actually, when our person that we report to, if we speak clearly to them about, what I really need is another person on this task with me, or I need a better computer, or I need more supplies in this area. We may not get exactly what we ask for, but we've been clear and people respect that. I think we have to learn to speak about our achievements. That's something that I think women do less well than men. And speaking about our real achievements is something that is important. keeping a running list of our achievements so that when we have or our accomplishments, so that when we have a review, we can present it to the person, and that will give us more leverage to either get a raise or to ask for what we want, the resources that we want, or to make decisions that we see are better for our career. Paying it forward. I think there's a huge value, and I have never seen it be a waste of time to help people, to be of service to others, not to be a doormat, but to be willing to be a good team player. You know, I think it was Rumi, the poet, that said, you can be a lamp, you can be a lifeboat, or you can be a ladder. Be one of them. Then there's always be learning. I do think that that's important. I think reading is hugely important, and I found it to be hugely valuable as well. And then trying to be someone that people want to work with. You know, we all know the person on the team when you know, it's asked, like, can you partner with Bob on this? And we think, oh crud, I'm going to do all the work if I partner with Bob. Or we think, yeah, I want to partner with Bob because he's very interesting and he always has good insights. So we want to try by being positive, being solution oriented, being known to get our work done, and being reflective, to be somebody that others want to work with. Then I want to talk about failure. I think failure is very important if we're going to be in charge of our career, because we will fail throughout our career. I speak as someone who's failed quite frequently in things, but I rebound quickly. And depending on our temperament, we'll rebound quickly or not, but try to rebound as quickly as possible and recognize that failure is just a part of life. And if we never try to do anything, then maybe we won't fail. But those that try and that strive and that want to grow will fail. Everything won't work out all the time. And then Sheryl Sandberg, in her book Lean In, had a really great point, which I think is so great for women, especially young women. If some of you are thinking about having a family or starting a family, don't leave until you leave, she said. And I think that's very valuable, because I think as women, we can be planners and we can think, you know, when I'm 42, I'm going to want to be doing this. And then when I'm 60, I want my life to be that. That's great. But you know what? We don't want to check out of our work until, you know, we do that. So if we're, you know, thinking I'm going to want to have a family someday, it doesn't mean we do any less well in our job today. We still want to deliver on good work. We still want to look for opportunities that you know, it's not a either or situation. So don't leave until you leave, you know. Same goes when we're looking for another job. If we're looking for another job, we don't want to be checking out of where we are now. We want to still be focusing on doing really great work where we are now, and then go on to the next thing. We want people to say, I'm so sorry she left, she was fabulous. And then finally, just saying yes to things that scare you. I think saying yes to things that have scared me have brought me some of the best opportunities that I have had at work and in life, actually. But we're talking about work more and career more. But, you know, saying yes to the things that's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be, makes me kind of nervous, you know. Those are often the things that build our capacity. And those are often the things that take some risk, but that have big payoffs. Now I'm going to go on to the resource page. These are some wonderful resources that I just think are fabulous. Strength Finders, which you can take the test and find out what your strengths are. Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, I think, is fabulous. No matter what you're doing for a career, whether you're staying at home for a career, whether you're getting your PhD, whether you're becoming the CEO of a company, Lean In, I think, is helpful. Women Don't Ask is all about the value of negotiating, something that women tend not to be very good with, and it's a great book. Love Your Enemy by Arthur Brooks. Terrific book that talks about the value of being able to dialogue and get along in a very real way with people who you still don't agree with. It's not about finding common ground. It's about accepting the disagreement and still being able to form a relationship. Presence by Amy Cuddy. It's a great book about kind of bringing your best self and having in ways of being that build trust and build attractiveness in a good way so that you can get your ideas across and build relationships. I mentioned Drive by Daniel Pink, and then my favorites, the bald guy, Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits. So I think it is 7:05, 7:06, and back over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank
Ellen.
you. Thank you. So
You're welcome.
if you stop your sharing.
I will.
There you go.
I have to get this thing out of the way, and then great.
Great.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so we now have the Q&A, and so at the bottom of the screen for everyone, there's the Q&A little logo. You toggle on that, and you can type in your questions that we can ask Susan. So we have a few questions so far. Susan, if you're ready.
Okay.
Great presentation, by the way. I know if everyone wasn't muted, hear a round of applause from everyone because it was phenomenal. Our first question, Susan, is can you define eating the frog again? Someone missed that.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Like, who wants to eat a frog, right? It would be the most distasteful thing we do every morning if we said, I'm going to do this every day. So my advice is there's always a frog in our day on our schedule. Do that first so that we can say, I've eaten the frog this morning. You know, it's kind of like do the hardest thing first in the morning.
Great.
When we start work.
Great. Thank you. Our next question is, what is the best advice you've received in your career?
You know, when I wasn't a particularly serious student until I got to Harvard, and then I became serious because I was too afraid I was going to fail out. And a friend of mine said to me, fake it till you make it, which I think is such a schlocky thing, but a schlocky saying. But I do think that so often we're questioning whether we belong somewhere, or are we good enough, and is this perfect, or you know, they're going to find me out, or you know, all of those things that just can wreak havoc on doing the next right thing that we know, you know, we'll be just fine, and knowing that, yeah, we are enough, and that if we come to the table and we work as hard as we can, that's all we can do, and we can have a lot of peace about that. So the idea of faking it till you make it didn't have to do with pretending to be somebody different, but it was more keep going forward and smile, and keep going forward and just do your work, and then you'll find you will accomplish great things.
Great answer. Okay, our next question. These are flooding in. So the next one is, you mentioned that you had a mentor in the past. This person is asking, how did that relationship begin, or how do you cultivate a relationship like that?
Yeah, it was actually a friend. Well, actually, my first mentor, I would say, was a boss who I worked with. And none of these people, only one was formal as a mentor. So I had a couple of mentors who I worked for a nonprofit, and it was a board member who encouraged me, and he became a mentor. The one I talked about that owned the steel company in Chicago when I was running a nonprofit, he was a friend of one of our board members, and he connected. So it wasn't like it was a formal mentoring program, and it wasn't like you know, we had a formal curriculum. One of the things with mentorship, though, is that quite often people's most valuable resource is their time. So we want to make sure that we're very, very, cognizant of that. And a lot of times when people are asked, you know, could you mentor me, you know, it's the time that they're most worried about. So, you know, sometimes you can just have it start casually. You meet somebody who you admire and you call them and you ask them, could we talk for 20 minutes and have coffee. I think whenever somebody asks me, can I call you and pick your brain? I always feel like, oh, that sounds exhausting. I think when we're reaching out to someone who we're hoping to get wisdom from or something, it can be good to say specifically, I'm trying to figure out what my next step is in my career. And I was wondering if you could share some things on that.
Mm,
To be very specific, to be very cognizant of their time.
sure. That's
And then
nice.
you build a relationship, and then the relationship can grow into something where you obviously are less worried about the limitations.
Sure. So then it becomes almost like a mutually beneficial relationship.
Right, because I do believe in pay it forward. It's something that there are a variety of young people that I work with, and I think that's part of the great thing of when you learn things to be able to share them with other people. And that's very satisfying. I remember, so that mentor that owned the steel company, I asked him once. He never had children, and I got the feeling that this was kind of something that he did. His wife was an educator. But anyhow, and I said, what number am I? And he laughed, and then he looked at me seriously and said 24.
Wow.
What do you mean? And he had taken it. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. Awesome. Our next question is, when do you find time or make time to read all these wonderful books that you've read?
Yeah, I read all the time. Okay. So I always have books. I always have a stash, whether it's on my Kindle that I travel with. So I have the books that I want to read, the books that I should read, and then the books that I'm not sure, but I've heard about them. Right. So either they're on my Kindle or I'll get a copy, and I have them stacked next to my bed. I always have them when I go to the doctor's office, or when when I usually have a book in my purse, or when I go to an appointment. I love traveling. I travel a bit for business, and I will take reading with me, because in theory, you turn off your phone in the airport and nobody can reach you until, or when you're on the plane, right? I don't take advantage of Wi-Fi on the plane unless I have to finish a report or something. But so I do that. But having the stuff there, and I always have like a bestseller a bestseller, a nonfiction, and so that, because you're in different moods. There are some days when you just don't want to read anything serious, and there are other days when you're like, I'm ready to learn something.
Yeah, great. So can I ask, how many books are you reading right now? How many different books?
Probably 3.
Great. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, another question is actually several people asked about. What advice do you have for women re-entering the workforce after being a CEO of running a family? So if they're on the, a little
Right.
bit more seasoned, 50 and beyond.
Yeah. So I think one of the most helpful things, and it's funny, I have a friend who's an engineer here in Chicago, and she had been out of the workforce raising her 7 children for a while, and had been volunteering and doing all these different, and I remember she said to me, tears coming out of her eyes a couple of years ago, I have no skills. I have nothing to offer a company. And I'm like, you're a woman engineer who has 7 kids, who's done all these things. Let's look at your resume, So what I think is to try to write down, the things that you have done in terms of what you would see on a resume, and put them in those terms. Now, it won't translate directly to say, I've run, I've been the CEO of my family. And people at work won't necessarily understand that, because that takes somebody who's kind of thought that process through. But I think that also you can quantify a lot of times volunteer work, or work that you've done on projects, whether it's, your kids' schools, or in the neighborhood, or at church. What are the professional things that you're bringing to the table? And then also the value that comes with that, of a woman who, has maturity, knows how to juggle things, is reliable, those things can be very valuable in the workforce, as well as your particular field. So if that's relevant, see how that might be translatable too.
Great.
And sometimes sitting with a friend and writing that out, a friend maybe that has some experience in resumes or something, because a lot of times if we do it ourselves, we aren't as clear as we can be in in putting forth the argument.
Sure. Great. Another question, and I hope this won't make you too vulnerable, but what is an example of when you have experienced failure and how did you learn from it?
Yeah. Okay. So one of a recent failure, I've had a lot of failures since then, I think. I mean, I'm in fundraising. You have failure all the time. There are a lot more no's than there are yeses. But I'll tell you about something more personal. When I was chief development officer at a large university in Missouri, um, we had the president who I served under, and we were doing very well. That president, he retired, and the new guy came in and basically got rid of the senior team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I look back, I guess, was that a failure? Yeah, I think I could have handled some things better looking back in hindsight. Then again, it was an opportunity too for me to change careers a bit, to use the same skill set and go into something that I had kind of been looking at and didn't know whether I'd want to do it. So that was an interesting thing. I look back, I think, could I have stuck with that job, and could I, when he was going through, could I have made the argument? Maybe. I'm glad I didn't. But it was terrible at the time. It was very stressful.
Sure.
Because it happened to be a very kind of a public position, and that there were just a lot of things going on. So yeah, but it's amazing how when one door closes, another one does open. And if you have a network, uh-huh. There are a lot of exciting things you can do.
Sure. And you love what you do now?
Yeah, I love what I do now. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah.
Great.
So coming from that great answer, thank you for sharing that with us. Do you have any advice on how to determine which risks to take in our jobs or career changes to try and move?
Well, I mean, it depends on what the situation is in the job. When to make a career change, I think it's important to weigh like why we want to make the change. Do we want to change because we want more money? Do we want to change because we don't like the environment? Do we want to change because we don't like the work? Or has our life changed? And so we need to be realistic about how I'm going to go to work these years. So I think it's being honest in that area. Those things are important before, and change is always a risk before you take a risk. Now, speaking up at work about something or it would be one thing, and there'd be a lot of things you'd want to weigh. There. Having a track record of really great work is always a great risk mitigator, because people know you, and they know your track record, and they know that you're sane, and they know that you do good work. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a risk. I don't know. Do you want me to talk about more risks, or you want to do a different question?
I think that's a great answer. I think that's a great answer. We'll take a couple more questions. Another question is, what are a couple of issues that you've seen that have stopped or discouraged any of the talented CEO-minded women that you've helped? Like, what kind of roadblocks have you seen them have?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I see with CEOs is sustainability, because it's such a challenging role. And I think any senior leadership role is challenging, especially for women, because we're trying to balance usually family and work responsibilities. So I think it's having habits of being able to recharge, having habits of being able to somehow have boundaries around the work, but then also make sure it gets done. Those are huge challenges. I think expectations are things that can go south on you very quickly. Those are some challenges, that I've seen with the women CEOs.
Great. Great answer. And then one of our last questions, what is a typical day for you? What does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, now I office out of my home, but a typical day, I do travel a bit, but I don't travel every week. So I get up pretty early. I do a time of prayer. I go to daily mass. I try to get to mass then, or maybe at noon. I I usually check in if I have friends or things people I need to get a hold of. I usually do that early in the morning, grab breakfast, and then I try to get a lot done before I start work. I try to be 100% there at work really hard, because I don't like to work 70 hours a week, which I usually could do. I often take a short lunch these days because I'm not traveling, and because, everybody's officing from home. I try to get I live in the city of Chicago. I try to get out of the house, put in my earbuds and go for a walk, just to get out, which I often don't do when I travel.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I try to have a specific stop time, knowing that some days I have long days. I'll have meetings in the evening, or, meetings later. Oh, I think my necklace is falling off.
Oh no.
Ugh. So yeah, and I try to set, kind of a game plan, because I often have stuff. I do some volunteer work at night, and I have things that I want to do in the evening as well. I try to have some quiet time in the evening, and spend time with the family, and try to have dinner with the family when I can. Can't always do that. Yeah.
That's great. That sounds like a very well-formed day.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, Susan, thank you so much for having us
Well,
tonight.
thank you. Thank you.
If again, I hear a round of applause if people were
Sure.
not.
Sure. And you had said something about if my email, you can leave that open. I don't know if
Sure.
anybody wanted to get a book or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. So we'll definitely, we actually recorded tonight's talk, so we'll send that out. And then we'll also send out your email too if anyone has any questions for you. So we are going to pick the wine and chocolate truffle winner right now. Drum roll. And the winner is Elizabeth McMillan. You are the winner. So I will get your contact information, Elizabeth, and I will send you that wine and that chocolate. So thank you again, everyone, tonight for coming. If anyone would like to support Yuma Center, you can totally support us at going to yumadc.org/give. And without any further ado, we are going to end the night. So thank you again. I hope everyone can join us, virtually next time with a glass of wine at the end of May. And thank you again to Susan. You are terrific. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.